The reason I decided to do the biography of Jack Benny was that I felt his magical career bears study. Today, everyone wants to be famous, to be a big YouTuber, or an Instagram star. But Jack made it big in radio and transitioned smoothly to television. He was a huge, long-time success in both eras. So, what was his secret? What could any content creator learn from Jack Benny? Well, as you will find as you watch this video, the answer is quite a lot. First of all, Jack was a hard worker, but he enjoyed a rewarding family life. He wasn't consumed by work. In business, his decisions have been masterful, and he holds low scores for mistakes as an artist. His selection of personnel and material were brilliant. His radio salary was top, the highest in the business, and he owned outright his Sunday half-hour show. Very unusual for that to happen. His personal appearances garnered top dollar, and all his motion pictures made money. His mother told him, "Jack, it's not enough to be good enough. It has to be as good as you can make it." And that was what Jack Benny's mother stressed to the young Jack. And by age 53, Benny had been on the air 16 years, the best paid and consistently the most popular star in radio, a part of Sunday for 25 million Americans. Jack was the focal point of all his parents' hopes, but by age 15 he had quit school to get on with his career. He was what his parents wanted, a professional violinist, and he practiced diligently. But Jack dreamed of the bright lights and the fast times of theater. Jack envied the carefree vaudeville actors to whom his Waukegan home was just a one-night stand. His parents had envisioned a respectful musician playing at Carnegie Hall in a white tie and tails, but Jack's career went much different. Jack started as the master of ceremonies, duties for a whole bill of vaudeville acts. He became well known on the vaudeville circuits. He began to be associated with big names of the times, Burns, Allen, the Marx Brothers, and Eddie Cantor, and many more. It was in this time that Jack met his future wife, a big-eyed girl in bobby socks and hair ribbons. The story goes that Zeppo Marx had introduced Jack to Mary, who also played the violin. At the first meeting didn't go well. They were invited to a home dinner, and Mary played the violin at the end of supper. Benny cringed and left the dinner in the middle of her performance. Mary had been performing the B on the violin when Jack tactlessly left right in the middle of the performance. Now, the insult had an injury. The next night, Mary and her friends attended Jack's comedy act, and they ruined the night by loudly eating popcorn, sitting up front, and not laughing at any of the jokes. 8 years later, Jack married Mary, and we could do a video on this alone. But Mary and Jack became a fixture. She even was a regular on his radio show. So you can't talk about Jack Benny without the solid fixture of his wife. They were a couple to his death, and that was a beautiful story as well. Well, the purpose of this video isn't to go through the Wikipedia of Jack Benny's accomplishments. They're simply far too many. But we wanted to get to the essence of how it worked for Jack Benny, because on the surface it seems like it wouldn't work. His comedy was down to earth and real to millions. He was a self-effacing style that just resonated with the times. His wife, Mary Livingston, who was his wife until his death in 1974. He had a child, one child, Joan, and she was the pearl of Jack's eye, and one grandchild, Michael Baker. Now, the Jack Benny program starred Jack Benny in a radio TV comedy series. It ran for more than 3 decades and was considered a high-water mark in 20th century American comedy. And Jack played one role throughout his entire radio and TV career, and that role was a caricature of himself as a minimally talented musician who was the butt of all the jokes. They were TV adaptations of the same radio show, starring Mary Livingston, Eddie Anderson, Phil Harris, Dennis Day, Kenneth Baker, and many others. 931 episodes of the television show that lasted 16 years on various networks, but mainly CBS. His first radio gig was as a guest to Ed Sullivan, and a year later he starred in the Canada Dry Ginger Ale program. That began on May 2nd, 1932 on the NBC Blue Network. And that lasted 6 months, and with the show moved to CBS, and Benny stayed with CBS until January 1933. The show flip-flopped around and returned to CBS, where it stayed until 1955. So the self-effacing style seemed to be the secret, but really it goes back to that line his mother taught him. It's not good enough to be good enough. You've got to make it the best you can. So Jack's story was a story of treating people well and having a great ensemble. Even though it was on radio, it's hard to imagine that. Today's audience can't imagine that. But radio ensemble comedy was the way to go. And Jack was the first to initiate a situation comedy style to his format. Instead of gags, he developed characters, and the main character he developed was himself. And so a mother who wanted him to become a concert violinist, Jack wanted to do vaudeville, but the times dictated radio, because radio was the dominant industry when Jack came of age. It was just coming on to the scene, and the big vaudeville acts were moving to radio. And Jack's first radio appearance was for free as a guest interviewer with the columnist Ed Sullivan. And that 15 minutes was to launch the most fabulous radio career of them all. Radio had just become the dominant media of the times, and Benny was the first to get away from gags. His secret was to use situation comedy as opposed to gags, which is totally not what vaudeville was. Benny cultivated a character who was stingy, stupid, grudging, and sourpuss. The smart guy with no brains to back it up. And 25 million Americans would wait to see him fall on his face every Sunday. Of course, his radio persona was the opposite of the real Jack Benny. Jack Benny was a gracious tipper. Even the slightest of servants, the bellhop, the mail person, the telephone girl, the real life, he was exceedingly generous. And once he was kept waiting by an Eastern governor for over an hour, and Jack walked out. And the horrified receptionist was simply told, "I have work to do. The governor has 4 years, but my contract is 18 weeks. And that was kind of the style of Jack Benny. So to get down to the essence of what made his success, and could it be something someone today could, use? And so I have studied it and studied it. He's got a long career. It does seem as if he was in a unique situation, catching radio at its peak and transitioning to television and basically doing the same show. So his secret was, according to him, one of the things Jack Benny says, he says, you can be funny all you want. But basically, the bottom line is the people have to like you. And so perhaps that was the secret. He was a likable person. His real life, he was extremely likable. A fairy tale life. Now, obviously, Jack Benny's life wasn't a true fairy tale. He had his ups and downs, and we could get into some of the personal things if you wanted to. But my purpose of this video was to find out, was there a secret that we could all use today that Jack Benny employed? It comes down to basically he was a hard worker, and he was insisting on excellence, not only from himself, but from all around him. And so the people around him were as much a part of his success as Jack Benny. But my observation was, like most comedians, he was a master of timing. You couldn't have done a show like that for that long and satisfied millions of people without understanding comedic timing. He also had a great voice for radio. It was a measured tone, and he really very seldom got really emotional. He just kept a basic sound. He was very poised, and he kept himself in physically good shape. He was always fit. He was pretty much wore the nice suit, but his look was pretty simple. The nice horn-rimmed glasses, the suit, and the hand gestures, all those things. He could get a laugh by the moving of his hand, putting it on his chin at the right time. So it's all about timing, and comedy is totally about timing. So let's give him credit for that. But can we take anything else from what he demonstrated to how you or I could come up and entertain or strike a chord with millions of people? Jack did it, and we'd like to too. So I think the secret was that he didn't make it overly complicated. He kept it simple. He understood he had to be likable, and he also stuck with the same character. It's amazing that that character lasted for that long. That tells you it had to be genuine. So there was a sense of genuineness about him. And I remember my parents watching him. I was young when he was on television. I didn't particularly understand why he was on. I didn't get. I was young, a kid. But I didn't get him, but I still liked watching him. But now, looking back as an adult and as someone who likes to put content out, I have studied him. And I have come down to the simple conclusion that he made himself good at what he wanted to do. He understood that comedy was timing, and he got good at it. He understood that he worked with a cast that stays together. It's going to work better in writing. And so he had a lot of assistants, and he wasn't just a guy that put a microphone in his face like Joe Rogan and entertained everybody from that point. But his secret was he had his formula, and he stuck to it, would be one way to put it. I think I'm guilty of minimalizing the older stars, the radio stars. Say, oh, they were just radio. What do they know? But Jack Benny, although he began in radio, he transitioned to television with no trouble whatsoever. The same audience, and it lasted a long time in a very competitive television environment. He was also in a multitude of movies with big A-list movies. So Jack Benny was a genuine star in all the areas of media. And he did it basically with one character, a stingy sourpuss who was waiting to be put down, a self-effacing character. And so it seems almost impossible for that to have been a success for as long as it was. So maybe the secret was Jack Benny just knew you had to be likable. And if that's the case, he was. But there certainly was more to that than just being likable. I believe the secret to any comedian, especially Jack Benny, was immaculate timing. Just immaculate. And I believe probably playing the musical instrument, the violin, and practicing as much as he did probably drilled that timing into his brain. And also he had a very calm personal life to an extent. Of course, being a celebrity, he certainly was involved with being around beautiful women and all that, but he was in love with his wife, and he loved his child, and he was just a nice family guy. And so perhaps that might be what makes him unique. Uh, be sure to watch. I'm going to do another follow-up video to get into some of his timing. I couldn't actually get licensing for a lot of the clips and would demonstrate that, so I'm going to have to work on getting some of those clips to show so you can demonstrate the timing. But if you haven't watched any Jack Benny, just go look at some of his stuff and watch and see if you don't think that his timing was the key. And the fact that he stayed true to the basic character and he didn't try to reinvent the wheel. So I hope I brought some light to the fact, but if any of you are trying to come up with some ideas to entertain or to do anything, YouTube or Instagram or something like that, I highly recommend go take a look at Jack Benny, because Jack Benny, he did it all.